if I'm doing a show about getting your shit together, I should be able to get my shit together. But in a lot of ways, I think the fact that I can't makes this more important for people that are in a similar situation to help them not feel quite so alone in their struggle.
This is The Fit Mess with Zach and Jeremy.
All right, this is The Fit Mess. Hi, my name is Jeremy, and my co-host, as always, is Zach. Say hello, Zach.
What's up, everyone?
Thanks for downloading the show. If you haven't already, please do subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This particular episode, we are joined by Ryan Foland. He's the author of the new book, Ditch the Act, Reveal the Surprising Power of the Real You for Greater Success. Sort of, I feel like it's a different sort of conversation for us because so often we do focus on either some sort of physical fitness routine or some sort of mental health routine. This one feels a little different for me because while it's about building your brand, it's really about authenticity and putting yourself out there. But Zach, you actually talked to Ryan on your own. I think this might be the first interview you did for our show on your own. Am I right?
It was interesting because I remember going into the interview thinking about, the topics here are, imperfection, open about your flaws, authenticity, and that's all that was running through my head. I was like, I can't do this. I don't interview people for a living. This is crazy. So, right. But yeah, it went pretty well. The one piece that everyone will hear in a few minutes is the imperfection, right? I'm not the one with the audio equipment, the professional grade audio stuff to do these interviews that sound really good. So it ended up being a phone call between him and I, and it doesn't sound great. It's not perfect, but we're okay with that.
So we often have our guests join us by phone, but in this case, your audio quality is also phone quality. So, if that's something that you as a listener can't tolerate, then, maybe this isn't the episode for you, but it's a conversation worth listening to. And I think it's interesting that in a show particularly an episode about vulnerability, about revealing mistakes, opening up about your flaws and where you don't do things 100% all the time. The fact that there is some shortcoming in the audio quality, I think couldn't be more fitting.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely not the best quality, but you know what? It worked well. The content is great though.
I agree. And this comes at an interesting time because if you heard the last episode that we did, the challenge that we left each other with was working out more. Zach, I know you're getting over coronavirus or something horrible over there. I'm getting
not
over
officially coronavirus, but it was pretty nasty.
I'm getting over being lazy and trying to get working out back into my routine.
I hear that one's hard to beat though.
It's a tough one. I've been working on that one for about 44 years. So. But this time around, the challenge was, I believe, was to exercise every day as much as possible, and it was because we were talking about Beachbody. We had the CEO of Beachbody on the show to talk about home fitness routines, and I did start using the 3-day or 3-week yoga retreat, which is the one I said I would do, and got to be honest, didn't get through every day of it. My wife wanted to do it with me, which was cool. So the first 2 days, nailed it, no problem. But then the third day, I rode my bike to work and was beat, and life got in the way. So we didn't do the workout that night. The next day, I had a bout of depression, couldn't shake it off. Again, didn't do it. Friday, rode my bike both ways to work, was exhausted, busy day, didn't do it. So while I did work out, through riding my bike or something else, I think I hit 5 of the 7 days that were part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And while that was okay, I felt pretty good about getting most days. I wanted every day. Would have been happier with 6, but 5 is fine. Diet sort of fell off the rails over the weekend, so that wasn't great. But all week leading up to it was pretty good. I think again 5 of the 7 days I did pretty well. And a lot of this rolled into the fact that I was using a new journal to sort of help hold myself accountable. And so that's been a really valuable tool, which we've talked about on the show before as well. Mm-hmm. So while I feel like I'm sort of implementing a lot of things and sort of pointing myself down the right path, I'm still coming up short and trying to be okay with it. And that's where I think this conversation is really powerful because so much of what we see, especially online, but from our peers, from people around us, is this image that they want you to see, particularly online. Everything is filtered. Everything is just the prettiest, happiest, coolest stuff that the person could possibly be doing. you're very rarely going to see somebody just down in the dumps, having a bad day, had cake for dinner. The dinner shot you always see is the grilled asparagus with the steak and the, perfectly proportioned. It's all bullshit. So I feel like this is a really important conversation to be having right now about authenticity and about being open about our flaws and our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I say it all the time. I am happy with like the 80-20 rule, right? As long as I'm doing the things I need to do 80% of the time and 20% of the time I go off the rails, that's good. That's where I should be happy. But then my OCD kicks in and I'm like, why can't I get that other 20%? And why am I not perfect all the time and doing everything I say I'm going to do? It's really tough to accept that you want to be at that 80-20. And then when you don't meet it, or when you can't exceed it, I get frustrated. It's very frustrating.
I have the same. And I think in some ways this show adds to that for me, because I feel like if anyone is coming to us for advice for how to live your best life, or whatever phrase you want to use, whenever I do fall short and I say, yeah, I'm going to take the challenge that you have for me to do whatever, and I fail, in some ways I feel guilty. Like I should be able to do that. If I'm doing a show about getting your shit together, I should be able to get my shit together. But in a lot of ways, I think the fact that I can't makes this more important for people that are in a similar situation, to help them not feel quite so alone in their struggle.
Yeah, that's reality. I mean, there are a handful of people out there who can work out 7 days a week and have the freedom and flexibility to do all the right things all the time. But I mean, I got a job. I can't work out all the time. I can't eat right all the time. I've got a kid. I've got all these competing priorities, and I can't be perfect all the time. And to ever think that I will be is just nonsense. So I mean, this is it. I'm doing the best I can with what I got, and I need to be okay with that imperfection.
And that was one of the things, in my journal that I was writing to myself about, was the fact that I came up short of a goal to work out every day, to eat right every day, to drink tons of water, like all the things that I should be doing. I fell short. But because I set the goal really high, I achieved more than had I not set a goal and just went, I really should start working out.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't eat that for lunch. Oh, well, it's one more day. Like, having that intention raised the bar for me, and I performed better, even though I didn't do as well as I wanted. Just setting that intention was everything to at least get me on a better path.
Yeah. And at the end of the week, like, you did 80% right. I mean,
Okay.
that 20% is not going to knock that 80% out.
Totally.
So it's all about being okay. I think it was our very first episode where, like, I think you said it, where you're like, I just have to be okay with myself. Like,
yeah. All right. Well, with that in mind, being vulnerable, being open, there's more ways than ever to do it, because we all have social media. We all have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You can be open and vulnerable with your coworkers, with your friends, with your family. I know in some places that's harder than others, but I think the conversation you had with our guest, Ryan Foland, about that really helps open a lot of those doors. Why don't you tell us, set this up for us a little bit and what you guys talked about?
well, honestly, I again, not having done an interview by myself, I tried to take your lead on it, and I had a whole bunch of questions set up for him, but when the call started, I just brought myself back to, how does Jeremy start all these? So I just asked him, tell me a little bit more about this book and what it's about.
Yeah, the title was actually sold to McGraw-Hill as something different. And once we negotiated and we all shook hands with digital shaking hands and everything was set, then they're like, well, the title we like, but it's a little too risque for us. And the original title was Expose Yourself.
Ooh.
Now, we understand that it had a bit of weight to it, and this was really still being pitched while the momentum and movement with Me Too was really getting into its own, and I'm excited to see that continue to happen. But we weren't saying, like, expose yourself and get a trench coat kind of thing. At the end of the day, I mean, we really think that the best way to connect with people is to help them see themselves in your story. And the typical challenge that we face as content creators is that, why would we put our worst content forward? You just don't do that. You work on things and then you get them ready for the public and you share them. But in this book, we talk about the whole process of that creation, the good and the bad, the problems that you have from not getting enough sleep to being stressed out to the family issues that come up along the way. It's when you start to expose those pieces of your story that people start to go, whoa, you're actually a lot more like me than I thought you were, as opposed to, oh, look at what you're doing. I can never get to that level. So the idea of exposing yourself is really the core of the book. And in the original title is Expose Yourself, Ditch the Act to Reveal the Surprising Power of the Real You. And they're like, can we just get rid of the expose yourself? And we've gotten into a little debate, but it is about ditching the act. It's about whatever act you think you should be doing or however you think you should be posting. Like, no, just take that act off, take the mask off, and really your value proposition and how you connect with people comes from who you are. Otherwise, you just sound like everybody else, which just adds to the noise.
Yeah, there's a line in the book, and you stole one of my questions. I was going to ask in more detail about what expose yourself meant, but there's a line in the book that says you've earned everything that you have by being the exact person that you are. And then you talk about sharing things with other people. Can you talk a little bit more about that line and what that means to you?
Sure. I think that society pressures us to have the next and newest thing, the version 2.0, the big nice car, what the celebrities are driving. There's just like this constant pressure that we need to achieve more, we need to be more, we need to strive for more. But if you take a second and you step back, you're like, look at what you have now and look at all of the steps that you've taken to get to where you are. There's always going to be somebody with more money. There's always going to be somebody that's younger than you, always somebody that looks better than you. But as you grow up and you mature into who you are, that's all you need. And when I talk with people who are hesitant to start their personal brand because they don't feel like they're ready yet, I have a conversation with them that they have a personal brand. It's just that they're not taking control of that narrative. And when it comes to content that we are not sharing, sometimes that's the best stuff to share. Like when you lose your water bottle or you bump into a wall continuously, even though you know it's there. When you have a pimple that just is driving you crazy because you've got a photo shoot the next day. All the things that make you human. And I don't think that we're really trying to sell people on authenticity. I think people know and they want to be authentic, but they don't know how to showcase authenticity when everything else around seems like, everybody's just showing their highlight reel or the 1 out of the 100 selfies that they took. And so in the book, we talk about how you go about this in baby steps. And so we've come up with an exposure resume, which helps you tease out the really, really good stories that you're afraid to share with people because you see them as bad. And then we share with you how to release those in small chunks. So we have 5 levels of exposure. And there are certain things that you are scared to share for a reason, because you think they'll judge you or they'll look at you differently. So we're not just saying like expose yourself and dump all your dirty laundry out, but start to share the little things that go wrong during the day as a level 1. And you'll start to see that it draws people to you. I remember that I was speaking in multiple states and multiple flights, and this is at a point well before the book when I thought my success as a speaker was proportional to how successful people thought I was. Like, why would I even tell them that I'm tired, right? So Leonard pushed me and he said, dude, if you're tired, why don't you tweet out how exhausted you are and ask for advice? So I tweeted, I'm super exhausted right now, 3 cities, 2 talks, XYZ. Does anybody have any suggestions? That tweet just blew up because now everybody has a chance to be like, oh my gosh, Ryan gets tired too. Here's the essential oils that I use. I do this. And it just became this conversation around not speaking, not anything other than like how people can help support me based on how they deal with that. So as we start to share level 1, level 2 has to do with personal relationships. Level 3 can be more financial or other challenges that you face. Level 4 is like the big stuff that you're afraid to share, and level 5 is what not to share. So it really acts as a roadmap of sharing who you really are in a way that gets you out there so people can get to know you. And if people get to know you, then they have a choice of whether or not they want to like you. And then if they like you, then they'll trust you. And it's really, if you think of your closest friends and your family, you trust them because you know them and you know how they respond in situations, both good and bad. So there's my long, excited, drawn out answer.
That's perfect. I love it. So you mentioned one of the steps is what not to share. And through this show, Jeremy and I have been sharing a great deal of information about ourselves that in the beginning we were very anxious about and very scared about it, but I think we're coming into our own. I would love to hear a little bit more detail on, for anyone who's listening who's thinking, you know what, I'm going to start sharing with people. What shouldn't we share? What's that step 5 kind of look like?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what not to share is things that have to do with your ego. So this is one thing that can become a trap to where you talk about how successful you are or the fancy cars that you drive or the exotic toys that you own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not to say that you can't share about that, but when you're sharing to basically say like, hey, look at me in my new Ferrari or look at me with this, like, even though it may feel like something that is good to share, it's what's going to separate you. It's going to make people be like, this person's just humble bragging, or they're trying to be more than they are. Mm-hmm. Now, for example, for me, I love sailing, and I'm usually on these really cool, amazing sailboats. And I'm not like taking a selfie in front and being like, boom, look at my new boat. I'm like talking about the experience and how fun it was to get on the ocean and things like that. But when it's just sharing for ego's sake, it's the wrong.
Right.
Also, politics. Now, I think everyone should voice their opinion and be political if that's what they're passionate about. But you have to understand that when you start to share about politics, you will have some people who don't like that. You will divide. It's about not creating that division. So on my Twitter, I have zero tolerance when it comes to talking politics. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have my opinion and I don't spread my influence how I can, but I don't get into politics online because it's very divisive. So be careful with that. In the same context, when it comes to religion, talking about religion can really create separation between people as you're gaining following. Now, if this is part of your brand, it's what you're doing, that's fine, but just know that if in your title you talk about, Jesus and God and whatnot, that might put an arm's distance between some people who you might want to connect with. So just be careful about that.
Sure.
Also, you got to be careful about anything having to do with sex. And, this is one that is probably common sense, but it's still amazing. People send pictures of their genitals. Like, even if it's privately, don't do that because you have no idea where that's going to end up. And we've seen time and time again that it can be a PR nightmare for you.
Sure, that's the time when copy and paste is not your best friend.
Exactly. Or screenshots, right?
Yep.
And then finally in level 5, you have to be careful about sharing things that go against your employee agreement or if you're contracted by somebody, right?
Yep.
So if you have an employee agreement that there's a certain standard that they say you can or cannot create posts around this information. If you're not aware of that and you post that, that's the wrong thing to share. So stay away from ego, politics, religion, body parts, and things that your employer would come back to bite you for.
All right. For me, that leaves a whole lot of, with those things aside, that leaves a whole lot of content of failures and areas where I have fallen down. So I still have a little ammo I can talk about.
You've got tons of ammo. I see you as like Rambo with your ammo across the chest. We all wear it. We just don't share it.
Yeah. And it's hard to share. Like, I do have to admit, like starting to talk about failures and where I've fallen down, it's, you battle with the ego quite a bit and it's difficult to start doing, but you said it in the book that, when you talk about being vulnerable, when you talk about, your failures, you get the opposite reaction of what one would expect. Like I would expect people to, turn away from me, but instead it actually caused them to be more interested, to want to get to know me better. It's incredible.
Yeah, and if you think about it in a situation offline, and you have a friend that calls you and says, hey, can I talk with you about something that's bothering me? You're going to listen and you're going to give the best advice. You're going to find a story that's relevant from your past. You're just going to be there for them. You're going to say, let me know what else I can do to help. Like intrinsically, we have this desire to help people when they open up to us and they share with us. Because when you share something like that, it shows that you're trusting the person that you're sharing it with. And so by you sharing some of these vulnerable moments, your audience is going to be like, whoa, like they're going to feel like you are giving them a certain amount of trust, and it is the opposite reaction than you think. They're not going to laugh and point fingers and throw stones. A lot of times they're going to message you publicly or even direct message you privately and really be there as just a support. And you don't always have to take them up on it, but as you start to share things that are going wrong and you get the support, it shows you firsthand that this really is a way to connect with people.
Yeah, it definitely is. The book talks a lot about fraud and imposter syndrome, and in preparing for this interview and reading about you, I certainly had a lot of fraud and imposter syndrome bubbling up and anxiety welling up in me that what happens if I don't do the interview correctly or anything like that. But I feel like you're probably a forgiving audience in that sense. But the book talks about, like I said, it talks about fraud and imposter syndrome. What is that, and why do so many people struggle with that?
Yeah, and so when you say fraud, it's in the context of feeling like a fraud, right? And I
Correct.
think that imposter syndrome is something that you don't really understand it until you experience it. And I think that we experience it on low levels a lot of times, but we don't realize it. It's just feeling like you're not worthy enough, or that you don't deserve this opportunity that's come up, or you have to second guess whether or not you should hit the publish button, because who gives you the right to share a blog that has a strong opinion about something that you've experienced, right? And it's a reality because we are always trying to convince ourselves that we need to be more, that we should be more, and it is so hard for us to look at ourselves outside of ourselves and go, hey, you're right where you need to be. Like, things are good, and you do deserve this. And so it's especially when you're creating content that's about yourself or your own life experience, and then you feel like, well, why would anybody else want to hear this, or why should I even make this video? Or if you start to get traction and some of your posts take off and you start to gain followers, it really makes you second guess what you're doing in the first place. And there's a lot of science that's into it, a lot of brain psychology, and Brene Brown, I think, really does a good job at translating it. She says that when it comes to vulnerability, it's the first thing that we look for in others and the last thing that we see in ourselves. And if you think about this, if you think of somebody who's up and coming in what they're doing, and it's a friend of yours, and they're now getting to that next level, like whether it's they become a VP now, or maybe they're getting more keynotes, or they're succeeding in what they want, you're sitting there from the outside cheering them on because you see exactly that all the work that they've done over the however many years gets them there. But when you're in the grind, you're in the driver's seat, you're not the one asking, are we there yet? You're just focused on the road. And so we talk about letting your fears guide you. And so if you're fearful about sharing something, or if you're fearful about taking on more opportunity or more responsibility, let that fear actually guide you, because your anxiety around it is just a different form of excitement in the same endorphins. It's just how you translate it.
Oh, I love the way you put that, how your anxiety is a different type of excitement. I'm going to take that with me. I like that.
You should. And I speak all the time, and people ask me, do you get nervous before you speak? I'm like, yeah, but that nervousness, it's very easy to mistake it as nervousness when it could just be taken as excitement. So like, yeah, I'm nervous, but like, I'm also excited. It's just how I translate that.
That's awesome. So the book, I wasn't expecting to have to break out a pen and paper when I started reading the book, but this isn't just a read and be done with it. This is a very interactive book, right?
Yeah, and we actually wrote the book in its entirety on one document, and then we created worksheets in a completely separate document. So you can read the book all the way through without the worksheets and still understand. But most books do that. And then you're like, well, I get it. You've sold me on this idea, but now what? Like, I know I need an authentic bio. So now do I have to go look for another book to write a bio? So we decided to keep it all in-house. And so for these key components, like the exposure resume, and for a rapid reflection discovery process, and for, everything from building a bio to creating a content calendar to stories, we put all these in there. And that was one of the hardest things about writing it, because if you get me and I'm sitting down next to you, I can explain anything. But when I'm not allowed to be there and all you have are the words in front of you, that was a big challenge. But we're really excited. Each one of the workshop, or each one of the worksheets could be its own workshop, but you have all the tools. So it's exciting for people to have the opportunity to not only understand the value of ditching the act, understanding and seeing examples of how it works, but then in the same book, giving them a chance to tease out all of the information that they can then start to share to start to ditch their act.
I have to say, I was very happy to realize that once I got done reading a certain section, it was time to, be applicable with it and grab a pen. And I was able to just start doing some of the work. It was very reassuring, because a lot of books, you read that chapter and then you put it down and you don't go back and do that work. Whereas this one, I really enjoyed the fact that I could take that work right into the book, and it became interactive. I really, really enjoyed it.
And for example, like the 313 challenge, like I have a whole podcast, the 313 challenge, and I bring people through this process. How do you reduce your messaging to 3 sentences, 1 sentence, and 3 words? And it's like, I've given all the marbles away. They're all there in the book, and it's so fun to get responses from the book like this, where the content is great, but then it becomes your own content because it's teasing out your own stories, and your unique voice can shine through based on what you fill in those spaces.
Our thanks again to our guest, Ryan Foland. He is the author of Ditch the Act, Reveal the Surprising Power of the Real You for Greater Success. And, success is such a relative thing. You can apply that to just making friends, to being a better person, to your actual workplace. I don't know about you Zach. I can, in my workplace, and really just kind of in life, I find that I have way more success in being honest about my shortcomings in my job. I'll be the first one to tell someone when I don't know what I'm talking about and where I think I need to default to somebody else for their expertise. I'll say to somebody, I don't fully get what we're doing here. Can you explain it to me better? Because if I fake it and I'm like, pretend like I know what I'm doing and then do it wrong, that's way worse than if I'm just open and go, no, teach me. I'd rather not be an idiot here.
Yeah, I've experienced that too at work. I think it is, like 90% of my job is talking to people and consensus building and making sure that everyone is aligned and on the same page, and then getting everyone in the same room and agreeing on it. But it's really helped me to, even if I am an expert in a particular topic, I will go into the room and play dumb, right? And tell whoever the expert is, hey, can you explain this to me, but use really small words because I need to be able to understand it, and coming out and letting people know that you're not perfect, or you're not the smartest, or you don't know what's going on, and letting them be an expert and be authentic about it themselves is really, it just builds a whole lot of powerful relationships at work, for me anyway.
Well, and I think in general, people want to help in general. Like, I think people like to feel useful. And when they see that somebody needs something, even if it's just explaining a concept that they know inside and out, that can make them feel good. Like, oh, I'm of value to this person. I can help them, improve in some way.
But it's also really helpful too to, one of the things I found is in like talking to people. So I manage people, and like if somebody is talking to me and we're having a conversation about a mistake they made, as the manager, I've flat out said, hey, when I made that mistake, this is how I handled it. And it actually is surprising because there is a greater bond when people realize that I made the mistake too. Like they're not alone. Like this is a common mistake, and just being open about that, about my own flaws, that you build a greater bond with people and they trust you.
Well, and you desperately, people desperately want to be seen as perfect, especially if there's something on the line like a job or your next raise or your review or whatever it's going to be. So to know that, hey, I'm free to screw this up once in a while on a path to growing and getting better is incredibly empowering. And I think that's true in the workplace, in friendship, in your relationship, whatever. Like if you have the freedom to not be expected to be perfect, it just allows for such a more genuine and open relationship.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So with that in mind, as we close out the show, we talked about how we ended our last show with a challenge of working out more. I think that challenge stands. I'm going to try and, continue and finish this 3-week yoga retreat program, even if it takes me 6 months. But I'm going to finish it. But I think what I want to try and do is implement some of what we're talking about here. And, I'm not a big social media guy. I look at it a lot. I look at it probably too much, but I don't share a lot because I feel like for me, it feels very narcissistic. Like, oh, look at me. Look at the thing I'm doing either well or badly. Or it feels like a cry for help if I, share the, oh man, I had a hard day today. Didn't work very hard. Got home and was tired and still didn't work. I just don't, there's something about the making it all about me thing that I'm not super comfortable with. So my challenge, I think, to you, because I think maybe we both share that to some degree, but I think even more to myself, is to every day post something about this effort that I'm doing to implement more physical exercise into my routine, whether it's my successes or my failures.
That sounds like a pretty ambitious project.
Are you game? Can I count you in for a daily update?
That means I have to share my successes and failures.
Yes. Hopefully your failures more than your successes so that I can feel better about myself.
Oh yes, there'll be plenty of failures. I mean, if I shared them all, I don't know, people might get upset and stop following us.
No, see, you weren't listening. You weren't listening to the interview. Exactly the opposite. Dummy.
Well, I'm just talking about the sheer volume, right?
Right. All right, I'm going to consider that a challenge accepted. So I better see an update from you every day, and I will push myself to do the same. And we should call each other out, privately if we don't see it. So if you don't see something from me, get out the cattle prod, and I'll do the same to you.
Yes, I mean, I only have like 200 to 300 examples of failure every day. So I mean, I got to be able to pick one.
Just pick one, no problem.
Yeah.
All right. If you're interested in the book that we talked about, Ditch the Act, we have a link to it on our website for the post of this particular episode, which you can also find at our website, thefitmess.com. And you can follow us online, where we'll be posting daily updates, at least throughout the duration of this challenge. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All of the links, again, at our Facebook or at our website, thefitmess.com. Thanks so much for listening. He's Zach. I'm Jeremy. And we'll see you again here at thefitmess.com in just a couple of weeks.
See you, everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and does not seem to lack anything, but we do need a legal disclaimer. Jeremy and Zach are not doctors. They do not play them on the internet, and even if they did play them on the internet, they would be really bad at it. Please consult your physician prior to implementing any changes that you heard on this podcast. The listener assumes that Jeremy and Zach do not know what they are talking about and that you will do your own research on the topics talked about on this podcast.